I hear too often that they think that I'm just trying to that it's all about the money. Okay.
Mm.
If it were all about the money, I don't know if I would be doing this type of law.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we bring you the inside baseball scoop from top legal experts across the country. I'm your host, Justin West. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm joined with Dana Duncan. He has a practice up in Wisconsin. How you doing, Dana?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Awesome. I'm doing great as well. Before we get going here, I'm going to jump over and show everyone your website. This is duncandisability.com. We'll have a link down below in the description, as well as the phone number. So you have a toll-free 888-458-2406. And we'll talk more about what Dana does here in a few minutes. And if you guys need someone who does what he does, links and numbers are in the description down below. Our first sponsor today is actually, you know what? Our first sponsor today is Greatest Movie of All Time. It's a podcast put on by Dana. I'll let him talk about that towards the end of the show here. You can find it on Apple as well as all your other podcasts as well. And he's basically going through all of the great films that are out there and trying to rank them. He's trying to outdo the AFI, the American Film Institute. You can listen to his podcast. He's got over 100 episodes, I believe, and you can figure out if he's doing better than the AFI or not. Our second sponsor is going to be lunchbreakworkshop.com. Lunch Break Workshop offers free training in 1 hour that you can watch during your lunch break and leverage it to grow your business or your practice. With this webinar focuses on teaching you, the current webinar focuses on teaching you how to leverage your business's brand to get new clients or new customers, which includes a simple and secret hack that can literally triple the number of customers your website brings in for you currently. Did you know that Google reviews play a powerful and important role in local SEO or search engine optimization? On this webinar, you will learn multiple insights that will help you grow your firm, all done in under an hour so you can consume the content over your break. It is not a sales webinar, and there is nothing to buy when you learn the strategies and techniques taught in the webinar. Visit lunchbreakworkshop.com to register today. Again, that's lunchbreakworkshop.com. Our third sponsor, yes, is Groove Funnels, which is a service that we also enjoy. If you love spending $5,000 to build a new website and you are looking forward to $79, $89, $99 a month to host on a platform that allows you to sell your product to potential clients and customers, then by all means, keep doing it, whatever it is that you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-in-one funnel website sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsame. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost, really at no cost. There's no cost, and you can build up to, I believe, actually 3 completely fully functioning sites. And they actually basically replace, it's a Swiss Army knife, really, of a website. It replaces just about everything out there from Wix or Squarespace or WordPress, if you use those for your website, to ClickFunnels, to Samcart, and more. It really is an all-in-one platform. And again, you can get started today for free. It is Groove Pages. Go to theattorneypost.com/groove. All right. And I am joined now with Dana. So Dana, how are you doing again?
Very well, thank you.
Awesome. Let me jump back over here so I can see us. All right. So Dana is an attorney. He's actually a native Wisconsinite, and Dana has family that's been living in Wisconsin for over 150, 160 years, since 1840. He has experienced multiple members of his family, including his mother and his father, suffering through disabilities, and that made it difficult for them to work, or even impossible. And is seemingly subsequently why he dedicated a lot of his life to helping Wisconsin natives as well as those abroad with the same challenges that his family faced. He's represented thousands of disabled clients in Social Security law, workers' compensation law, as well as claims in federal appeals. Outside of Wisconsin, he also serves multiple other states. He's got the the rights to appear in multiple courts, including Colorado, Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois. He's an avid reader, a fan of both the Brewers and the Packers, the latter of which he is apparently a shareholder in, as well as an amateur historian and a Civil War Roundtable leader. He's taken up numismatology, which is, of course, the study of coin collecting. And he runs, as I mentioned before, a podcast called The Greatest Movie of All Time. He lectures on law. He records webinars and training tools for other attorneys and non-attorneys in the field. Question number one I have for you, Dana, is what did I miss?
Boy, I actually think that's a pretty full schedule. I didn't really stop and think about it. It's no wonder I'm tired by the end of the day, but not much. I think you got everything.
I try to be at least a little bit thorough and do a little bit of research. Most of that was cribbed from your LinkedIn and your website, but it sure makes it look like I know what I'm doing here. So, well, Dana, let me ask you this question number one then. Can you give us a short pitch for your firm? Tell us who you are, what you do, who you serve, who your ideal clients are. Give us your elevator pitch.
Okay. The general philosophy of this office, what I've stood by is my clients have enough going on in their lives worrying about their health and getting as well as they can. They don't need to deal with the pressure of having to complete a bunch of forms and getting stuff set up for a Social Security disability case. So when I talk to my employees, the first thing is we don't sell legal services, we sell convenience. You're hiring somebody who does this from start to finish. We go from initial application all the way to the appellate courts. And as you indicated, I do appellate work. I've got cases pending in 3 different circuits. That, for those of you who do not understand that, it's the federal courts or federal district courts, courts of appeal, then the United States Supreme Court. So I'm one step below there on a regular basis. Probably have had close to 75 to 100 cases either pending or have been in court. Either a lot of them are done after I do initial briefs, gets stipulated. The government concedes that I'm right and just agrees to remand the case without it even going to the full court. So what we pride ourselves on is not only the convenience, but the fact that we have specialized knowledge and we understand things a little better. And we're not just a general practitioner who adds this to their practice. We focus on this and we know a lot of the nuances. We tell our clients, you get the small town atmosphere with a national reputation because we know all the doctors in this area. We have a reputation among the doctors and can a lot of times solicit information or reports from doctors that others can't. We have a lot more knowledge too about all aspects, everything from knowing the judges that you are going to be appearing from if you have a hearing, to knowing the vocational experts and being able to cross-examine them fully, where a lot of others do not. And quite frankly, and I don't mean to be dismissive of others, but there are a lot of Social Security lawyers who are not Social Security lawyers. It's one thing to be able to do a hearing and go in and win the easy cases. It's much different to have a very complex case with some significant issues and having somebody who knows enough about that aspect to be able to win those incredibly difficult cases.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And it's an area I think a lot of people, if our listeners are younger, this may not be an area that they're aware of, but I know we have listeners in all different aspects and all different ages. So
I tell my associates when I interview them, because they'll say, well, I don't know anything about Social Security law. I said, that's great because I'll teach you. I don't want you coming in with preconceived notions that I have to try to break you of bad habits. We're going to do things my way. It's been successful. This is the duck-billed platypus of law. It has no other companion. The administrative law judge in Social Security wears, as the case law has indicated, 3 hats. He represents the government, he makes inquiries, and he helps the claimants. No other area of law does a judge have that broad of responsibility.
I did not know that. That's really kind of neat. Well, let me ask you this. I made a guess based on your bio and a few things that I read as to what sort of got you into it. But what got you into law in general? And then, of course, this aspect of law. Were you one of those kids, Dana, that always just knew you wanted to be a lawyer when you grew up? Is it something that as you hit your adult life, you kind of fumbled into, or how did that happen?
From a very small age, I've loved history and I've loved politics and such. I'm the nerdy kid who, and at age 7, is watching the Watergate hearings, the summer of '74. And that's where I kind of migrated to. So the practice of law, my idea is I was going to go to law school, and then see about either government service or something else. And for the most part, I figured out early on that I enjoyed the law and I enjoyed the application of the law and the daily tussle, grind, whatever you want to call it, and really did appreciate law more. I did make one brief attempt into politics and realized that I do not have the personality to smooth, to solicit money, or to keep my mouth shut for political expedience. Three qualities that are not conducive to being a successful politician. So I'm much better in this area. As I indicated, I did a lot of Social Security work from early on. Within the first year, I started practicing, but I did a lot of other things. I was a very general practice for about a number of years. Unlike a lot of attorneys who do administrative work, I had more than 150 jury trials in criminal and civil cases. I've tried a reckless homicide. So I have a lot of courtroom experience, which puts me at a great advantage for questioning and cross-examining in a hearing. I always say in my previous life, I did this. About 17 years in, I got to the point where saying, I really enjoy doing the Social Security work a lot more than I do the rest of this. So I'm just going to put all of that off and I'm going to focus on this. And it's been a great opportunity. I really am passionate about it. I believe that every day that goes by, I can actually see the benefits that I provide for my clients. It's not uncommon for us to get a note saying that from a client saying, thank you very much. Because of you, I'm no longer homeless. So unlike family law, where by the time you're done, your client hates you, the spouse's client really hates you, and the other attorney can probably just stomach you. I have everybody happy usually with me by the time we're done.
The only other one that works out that well, I think, is the injury attorneys when they hand you like a big fat check, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Let me ask you this. Obviously, we just came through year and a half, 2 years of pandemic. Theoretically, we're on the outside of it. I've seen some doctors with some ruminations that are less than stellar for the future, but we'll see what comes of all of that. I'm going to assume for right now we're heading out and into brighter, greener pastures. For the last 2 years, we've all been living under that. How has the pandemic affected you? How has it affected your practice of law, and how has it affected your clients?
Okay, well, when the pandemic happened, I was doing a set of hearings. I had like 4 hearings over 4 different days in Duluth, Minnesota. So I was staying in a hotel up there, and every night I would go after the hearings. I'd go down to the hotel bar where I'd have dinner and watch. And when Rudy Gobert from the Denver Nuggets is diagnosed with COVID and the NBA shuts down, I'm like, this does not look good. So when I got back to town on Friday, I set about having, at the time, my son was working for me yet. He had subsequently or had given notice before the pandemic happened that he wanted to move out of the area, kind of get away from home, more or less. But he and I and my wife, who's the office manager and a non-attorney rep, sat down, kind of wrote out a list of things. We had our assistant office manager run to Walmart and buy every laptop that Walmart had in stock.
Huh.
And we started handing them out to all the employees on Monday, as we indicated we were likely to be shutting down within the next week. And we had our IT people working to get everybody set up, and everybody worked remotely. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that have to be centralized and filed centrally. So my wife would come in, and everybody would send things to her, and she would process them and then ship them out. And I'm working from home, writing briefs, following up, preparing for what's going to be telephone hearings. She was working a lot of long days. I eventually ended up going into the office and working at the front desk and answering the phones so that she could focus on getting paperwork out. So I was the receptionist for about 2 months. And
They say as a business owner, you wear a lot of hats.
yeah,
Is that
and
and
quite frankly, yep. And quite frankly, I tell all the employees, there's nothing in this office that I did not have to do at one point in time. So and I think that's part of the responsibility. Every once in a while, if, like, for example, we've had for staff baby showers within the office. So if you want to attend, because that I'll go down and cover the front desk so that all the staff can attend that if they want. And sometimes have to put yourself in that position in order to show the staff that you don't think you're better than anybody else. It's just at this point in time, what you've accomplished and where you are doesn't make you better. It just makes you different. And but anyway, so that went on. The biggest problem is the fact that there was so many unemployment benefits being paid out for all that time frame. No one was applying for disability. So we had a huge drop off in claims and new clients. But even then, we just, I think there was about a 1/3 reduction overall in claims during 2020. We didn't see quite that big of a drop off. I think we dropped off about 10% because we had been growing in a pretty large trajectory to begin with. And then my wife and I decided we would just double down on all of our online advertising, figuring that people are going to be sitting at home, and by advertising, sometimes they'll sit there and go, maybe I should apply. And it seemed to work. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I mean, there's two facets, that and then the decline in clients. Third would be that we've had to go to hearings by telephone, and I don't like them. They're not personable. I don't think the judge necessarily gets a good impression of the claimant, and it's to some extent dehumanizing. I think it's harder for a judge to assess somebody if they can't see them.
Yeah. Now, I find it interesting that you say you guys went to telephone hearings as opposed to like Zoom hearings. In fact, one of the reasons this podcast got rebooted about 1.5 years ago was the pandemic. All of a sudden, attorneys knew how to Zoom. Everyone was Zooming. Everyone had Zoom. I used to have to walk people through how to get Google Hangouts is what we were originally based on and whatnot. So I'm kind of fascinated that a lot of the people up in your jurisdiction aren't doing Zoom, because you at least have like the face-to-face simulacrum. Is there a reason they didn't go that route? Or is it
Social Security is deemed Zoom to not be secure enough because they're passing Social Security numbers, dates of birth, all kinds of stuff over through those hearings. So they teamed up with MS Teams software. It took them about 6 to 8 months to get that in place. The problem is that there are a lot of problems with it. And that's simply because the Government Services Administration, the GSA, does not always buy state-of-the-art equipment. And as a result, there's a lot of glitches that occur. Not to mention that I'm in north central Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a pretty large state. I'm 2 hours north of Madison. If that's any, it's not like we're out in the woods, but a a lot of our clients are, and a lot of them don't have high-speed internet. And so to connect up with a client, so a lot of them are homeless. They don't have access, and you can't have these people come in and sit in a library someplace with a video monitor and do their hearings. So telephone becomes the ability. And a lot of my clients end up with what's commonly referred to as the Obama phone, which is that during the Obama administration, they made for poor and disabled people an opportunity to obtain low-cost cell phones that you can receive. A lot of times you can make emergency calls and receive calls, but you don't make calls necessarily, or very limited in the calls you can make. And some of them, that's their only ability to communicate, which means then that they're the ones who are doing their appearance by phone. Not always the greatest quality as far as hearing what's being said, but it's better than nothing. So.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. I was curious. I'm assuming you deal with generally an older demographic too, if it was just a technological issue, but it does make sense with disability and Social Security that maybe a lot of them just don't have the actual physical device capability. And I didn't think about the security issue. I mean, I do everything on Zoom these days, but that's kind of interesting. It makes sense. And I've talked to a lot of attorneys that do hearings and everything else via Zoom, and nobody's ever mentioned the security issue. And in fact, I know that Zoom is technically, I think, run by the Chinese, if I'm not mistaken. And so, in fact, years ago when I tried to reboot after the Google Hangouts debacle, a lot of people are like, what is this Zoom thing you're talking about? Is this some Chinese company? I don't know if I want this on my computer. And everyone's very uncomfortable with it. Now, again, almost everyone Zooms, but it's interesting. I hadn't considered it from that aspect.
Well, a lot of my clientele is older because the way the system is built, the older you are, the more or the easier it is to get on disability. In part because of age. I mean, I'm 58. I can't just jump in a car and drive for 4 hours like I used to and pop out and be fine. I get out and I'm stooped over and I got to take a few minutes to stretch out. And, that happens when people get older. Also, you're not going to retrain people very well in their 50s for a job and such. So that's the way the system's geared. But there's been a dramatic change in technology, even for people in their 50s and 60s. When I started this office, separated from my old firm, I did a study. I sent out a questionnaire to every client. How do you get your news? And a lot of those people were still watching television and listening to radio to get their news. And I would ask the question of, when you need to find a plumber, what do you do? And it was always the yellow pages. Okay. So that was where we started, was advertising in yellow pages and things like that. About 5-6 years ago, it flipped. And now they get most of their news off of their phones or the internet in general. And most of them look up things on the internet and through Google instead of using yellow pages. I'm almost, I've even gone as far as asking people, can you tell me where your yellow page book would be in your home? And only about 10% can readily go, oh yeah, it's in the desk drawer. So that's how it's flipped just in 5 years. And so I think from a technological standpoint, it's not going to change. I think it's going to even be more, because even I'm on the very edge where computers were just starting to get into high schools and colleges when I was in high school and then into college. The group behind me has grown up lived with them from little on. They're going to have no problem. So it's technology is not going to go backward.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. That's interesting, the demographic shift and how that happened just in this little 5-year window, though. I'm trying to figure out what would have been so different about that 5 years that all of a sudden you'd switch, or maybe it's just the ubiquity of just everyone's using it and whatnot, or those are the people that were just young enough to caught on and figured it out. Or maybe they're just not getting the yellow pages anymore. I don't even know the last time I got the yellow pages delivered. They used to drop it off for free. I don't know if I've seen one in a year or so.
I bet you've got one laying around someplace where they like put it out in the middle of like an apartment complex. They'll throw them out in the doorway, and then you have to pick them up as you're going in. But it's changed. I remember listening years ago, one of the concepts of Apple and what made Apple so successful is Steve Jobs instilled this like aspect of coolness, like we're a special club. Not everybody can be an Apple user. Only the cool people can, and we have some, a certain technology in a certain group. It became an exclusivity club. And I'm finding with technology and phone usage and such, it's the same thing. It was the people, oh, I have a smartphone. And those that didn't have smartphones felt like they were missing out on so much by not having one. So whole groups of people just transitioned and started doing it simply because they wanted to be in that other group that was getting all the information and all the technology and having all the fun. And so that's why I think it really took off as quickly as it did.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think we've all kind of lived it and seen it happening, but I just never really thought of it from I guess, a demographic perspective. So it's kind of neat. All right, well, let's move on for a little bit here.
Sure.
I do have a couple of questions I want to dig into with you. Um, One of my favorite questions to ask is I'm a firm believer, and I said this, I think, in the pre-roll, my listeners know this as well, but I'm a firm believer that you can tell a lot about somebody by how they deal with success, but also how they deal with failure. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here. The first question is this: Can you tell me and tell our listeners, Dana, about a time when in your practice of law you failed? It could be a big fail, it could be a little fail, something that you still think about while you're in the shower, crying for hours, or just something like, man, that shouldn't have gone the way that it went. But tell our listeners about a time in your practice of law that you failed, but also what you learned from that failure and how you carry that forward to help your clients to this day.
Yeah, well, I could tell you one big one that I had, or what, well, you could say whether it was or wasn't a big one, but a case I had in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals of all places, had worked and worked and worked on a brief. And what ended up happening is the final version somehow got deleted and a prior version improperly marked and edited ended up being pulled up and printed and put in, sent to the court as the brief. And
Mm,
I had my copy of the original that I thought was the one the court had. And during oral arguments, I get lambasted about this brief that they're looking at. And it took me several minutes to understand what had taken place. And it was embarrassing. I mean, the worst part of it is the oral arguments where this was all taking place are all recorded. So anybody can go back and listen to it whenever they want. And I swore up and down at that point in time that I would make sure, be much more cognizant of making sure things were done properly and that it was done. So we have not had that problem since, but it was a big one. The other one I would point to is that in stuff it's a fail, but you start looking around and you start thinking about it in retrospect. We've had within the first 2 years of our opening our own office, we had the government shut down. Okay, and you don't think about that, but when 90% of your income is derived from the federal government and they just stop paying the attorneys during the shutdown. And before this happens, they plan for it. So they gear up and stop paying the attorneys and process all of the claimants' payments. And then, so if they're shut down for 10 days, I've got 6 to 8 weeks before the shutdown where all the payments are slowed down to a crawl. And then after the shutdown, I have 6 to 8 weeks with it. So all of a sudden you now realize that you have basically 3 months of no income and you've got employees dependent on you, not to mention your own self. And in retrospect, I look at that as a failure because I didn't envision or think about the possibility of this happening and did not maintain cash reserves sufficient to get through it and really struggled. It was a nightmare, a lot of sleepless nights, and kicking myself for not doing X, Y, and Z, or in making sure that I had a line of credit available to tap into beforehand. And so Um, I really, I've learned now to try to more anticipate, be more anticipative of the potential that could happen that may not necessarily happen. So we have different things going on for, so now I'm maintaining idea of what our outstanding bills are going to be, what our income is coming in, and knowing about what we have to do in order to do it, how much big the payroll is, keeping track of all the receipts and all of the payments that are done. I mean, we're to the point now where we actually have a full-time person who does nothing more than track down our payments, because you'd think the government would be able to pay us on a regular basis as required. No, not even close. Um,
But they're the
so we
government.
have,
They don't ever make
yeah.
mistakes.
Oh yeah, no, they don't make mistakes. Just ask them. So, but I guess those are the two things that I'd point to, just as far as this area or this practice of law.
Gotcha, gotcha. No, that's fine. That makes good sense. Well, let's put the shoe on the other foot then, though. I'm sure you've dealt with some very difficult cases and pulled out some wins that you're incredibly proud of. Can you let our listeners know about some of the things you've done, a couple of cases, maybe, or a couple of clients that you were able to solve or help that really just made a huge difference, or is it really just an everyday thing?
That's an everyday thing, but I mean, there are a few that I can point to. I had a client who, um, see, most people do not understand the way disability works. Is it's like an insurance policy. You pay in, and then you have like coverage. And once you stop paying into Social Security, your coverage eventually lapses. And most people do not understand that there's this period of time. It's approximately 5 years. There's a way of calculating it after you stop paying in before your insurance runs out. I had an individual who was a middle-aged guy. He went to work for a ginseng farmer in northern Wisconsin. Wisconsin has the largest number of ginseng farms in the world outside of China.
Wow.
Um, but anyway, he worked for this guy, and every week he got a check, and the check showed that he had money withheld, and it said 3 years or 4 years into this, he gets a tax deficiency notice from the IRS. Apparently, this um, foreign national who owned the ginseng farm was taking out the taxes, federal and state income taxes, Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, and not paying it in.
He was just keeping it.
He was just keeping it. And then he fled the country. And so my guy now has no insured status, has had a heart attack, cannot work. And we're sitting here going, what is this guy going to do? And because of the time frame of where the heart attack was, it was outside of his insured status. So he could have been, at that point in time, it doesn't matter. If you don't have insured status, you don't qualify. It doesn't matter what your medical condition is. It took me a while, but I found some obscure laws and some case law that indicates that if you believed you were paying into the Social Security system, then Social Security can credit or give you credits for that income, even though they never received it.
Hmm.
And it took going before an administrative law judge that he denied it, saying that I was wrong. Went to federal court. The court said I was right. They sent it back. Next time around, the judge issued another decision, basically saying, no, I don't care what the court said. I know I'm right. Then going back to federal court, and then back down and doing another hearing, which the judge wrote improper decision, and the appeals council who oversees them kicked it and said, no, you can't. The thing was all said and done. I was in federal court, I believe, 4 times and had 5 hearings. It took 13 years, but I ultimately got the guy his benefits, and which was good because by the time he finally got it, it was a very large check. There was enough money there to help take care of his wife because it was pretty clear he wasn't going to be alive very much longer because of his heart. unfortunately, and he did pass not too long afterwards, but at least I got him the money, and his wife is at least able to survive and live well now. I wish I'd have been able to do it better, but I did everything I possibly could in that case. So that's one area. The other is recently the Seventh Circuit's kind of was fairly favorable to claimants for a long time. Seventh Circuit in Chicago, covering Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. New members were appointed in the last few years, which are more conservative and less friendly towards claimants. But I was able to get one of the major decisions on vocational testimony. Between that and I've had a couple of other decisions that, I have one decision that last time I checked cited approximately 6,000 different other cases for precedential authority. So it always kind of feels good when you are able to provide an interpretation of law that impacts not only your client, but other clients, and makes it easier for them to get their benefits.
No, absolutely. That's awesome. That's awesome. And that first story is that's pretty intense. You said 14 years, 13 years?
13. It's not quite the longest case I had, because I had another one that was 14 years, and that went through 2 different circuit courts, both Seventh Circuit, then she moved, and the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. So that one she ultimately did, and she called rather ecstatic because the check, she was a union, a former state unionized employee, so she had a very good income. Her check was kind of like winning the lottery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And I love hearing stories about that where you can just really change people's lives and make them better. I think there are definitely some aspects of the law that do that less. There's some aspects of the law that do that more. And I know that disability, kind of like permanent, like personal injury, there's people out there that are hurting and there's nobody else that can help them. And then you step in and you make the difference. So that's really awesome. Well, let me ask you this. You've seen a lot of people in your tenure as an attorney. You've handled a lot of cases. What are some of the most common issues that people bring to you? Or what are some of the most common types of cases, or if that makes sense? I know that you divide it into 3 main areas, but like what are some of the most frequently visited cases that people bring to you?
Well, we do, our largest volume is just applications and hearings. Hopefully, the national average at a hearing is about 40% of cases that go to hearing are won. Our number is closer to 55%, simply because we know a little bit some of the intricacies involved.
Better than Vegas odds.
Yeah, and so hopefully we don't have that many cases of ours that we end up appealing. Usually, if we lose a case, though, we've put groundwork into the hearing itself that is grounds for the case being reversed at federal court. And so we get probably about 50% of our losses back in before a hearing and win about 70% of those.
Oh, wow.
So even when we lose, we still can win. Delays it for the client, unfortunately, but so the biggest aspects of that, and then when you're doing hearings, again, 50, 55, 60, those are the key ages to determine if you're limited to sedentary work with no past relevant work, and you qualify. And the more difficult ones are the people that are younger than 50, because you have to establish that there's no work available that they can perform on a substantial basis. That means full-time in the national economy. And so it's a lot more difficult to do, but that's one of the areas where we really focus, because we have an ability to understand somewhat how to handle mental health claims that are very significant, and then dealing with other things which tend to inflict younger people, such as rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, chronic pain syndrome, those types of things, which are usually the basis or a significant factor in a lot of younger people's claims.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Um, So let me ask you this. I'm sure that there's a lot of misunderstandings about what it is that you do. Maybe people come to you thinking you can just magically make something all better. That just is totally out of your power or whatnot.
Yeah.
What are some things? What are some misconceptions people often bring into your law firm about what it is that you do? Or what are some questions people should be asking that they often just don't ask?
Okay. Well, the thing, the common misconception, and I hear this constantly by both clients and non-clients, which is, you know, I know somebody who got disability and there's nothing wrong with them. Okay, you can't tell that.
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of people that seem normal and seem fine. They're walking around in general. They may have a significant mental health issue. They may have a heart defect, which while they're just walking around, it isn't a problem. But anytime they have to do any kind of exertion, then they start having heart pain or palpitations, or they have chronic fatigue that sets in that they can't continue doing that for more than a few hours. You can't tell. Every case is different. And, whenever I hear well, I know somebody who, I just cringe because it doesn't apply. Every case is different. You have to handle it. Is from that go. The other thing is with clients, I hear too often that they think that I'm just trying to that it's all about the money. Okay. If it were all about the money, I don't know if I would be doing this type of law. You can make a really nice living. It's not like you're going to have that 1/3 money that you're going to get in a major 7-figure PI case that can really set you up for life. It's not about the money. And in fact, I tell clients, there are a lot of times where we'll take a client in and our goal is and this is something the clients should be asking, what's your philosophy on these? Because unfortunately, I think there are law firms who don't do a very good job from application until the hearing because they're trying to build up a back wage because we get paid as a percentage from the back wage.
Mm-hmm.
My philosophy is get the clients in and do everything you can early on. If you can win the case and you've only spent a few hours, you're still going to get paid. You don't have much cost in or effort into it. You're going to do fine. Do what's always best for the client. And on certain cases, you're going to lose and you're going to end up getting screwed on it. Okay. But by the same token, you're going to have cases where you've done nothing really significant, but you know enough to do certain things, you'll win. And you've spent almost no time at it. Those balance out. And that's what you have to keep in mind. If you start putting your interest in deciding things for your client, you will not be very successful in this practice. It's always about putting the client's interest first and then worrying about your fees and how you're going to be paid second. I know that's contrary to a lot about business. I have several other businesses that I own outside of this. And if I did that in the other businesses, I wouldn't stay in business very long, but I think that's what makes this special.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. I would no, that makes a lot of sense. I was actually looking at a 5-star review that you had here, and so I was going to pull this up really quickly and read this one. You have a couple of them here. This is from 3 weeks ago from a gentleman named Todd O. We'll leave it like that, even though it's public. He says, Duncan Disability helped me get qualified for my Social Security benefits, and on the first try, I was in very bad shape, and with their knowledge and experience, I now get the best support and care that I needed. So very grateful for their help and highly recommend their services. God bless. And then Martin M. also wrote, happy and extremely pleased with the work that Duncan Disability has done for me. I look forward to working with them with my annual review and feel confident that I will get the same professional and outstanding performance that they conducted throughout the time working on my claim. highly recommended. So you've definitely made a number of people very happy. Some of these are actually available on your website as well. Here in a minute, I'm going to ask you a couple more fun questions. We can
Okay.
shift the tone here. I don't want to take up a ton of your time, and you've already been very generous with what you've given us. I'm going to jump over and read from our sponsor, but before I do that, I'll give you a preview of those questions. You can percolate on them a little bit.
Okay.
Question number one is, if you were able to go back in time and find young Dana and give him some advice as he's getting started on his legal career, other than something like, "Hey, buy a lot of Bitcoin. Trust me, it's going to be big." Outside of that realm, what advice would you give a young Dana, and of course, by extension, a new attorney fresh out of law school who's starting their own practice? And then number two is, I'm going to give you my magic pen. This is a new magic pen. This is an On Point ball pen, and it's not as good as my Inkjoy, but it's also magical. And with this pen, you can strike any law from the books, or you can edit the law, or you can add a law that needs to be there. It could be a big major law with sweeping ramifications for all of your clients. It can be a tiny little stupid law that makes you fill out a form in triplicate 8 times a week. Whatever it happens to be. So
Yeah.
think on that for just a
All
minute.
right.
While we do that, we're going to jump over and take a look at your site again, link down below in the description. It's duncandisability.com. That's duncandisability.com.
That's my
888.
lovely wife there on the right.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
so
Awesome. Yeah, I saw
uh,
your staff, and I saw you a
yeah,
couple of people in here with the last name Duncan. So this looks like it's at least a
yeah,
semi-family affair.
yeah. I outkicked my coverage with her, um, and but yeah, it's my son worked for me for a number of years. He handled all the federal filings and kept track of everything. He still works for me remotely, part time. But my daughter worked here for a while until she finished school, and she's a teacher now up in the Twin Cities area. And my other daughter is finishing her master's, and she's working here yet. She's hoping to get into, her ultimate goal is to do remain collections for the federal government. So like when they're trying to find lost or MIAs in Vietnam,
Hmm.
um, she has a background in archaeology. She would be part of the team that would go to to gather the remains and such and bring them back for burial. How she decided she wanted to do this as a life's calling, I don't know, but that's her big thing. And so she's getting her master's in military history. So anyway, so there's a lot of us that have been through here. So
Awesome. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history stuff too here in a minute, because
yep,
I actually have my degree in history and philosophy, and I looked at grad school for a while for history, but just never, it wasn't in the cards at the time, and who knows what the next 20 years will hold, but we'll talk about that.
sure.
I'm going to jump over really quickly and read from our last sponsor, which is Rocket SEO from hundreds of customers. Are you a firm owner or a business owner who knows that being on page one of Google is important, but you're afraid to work with a search engine optimization company because you know that SEO is both expensive and slow? Well, it doesn't have to be. Not anymore. Rocket SEO from hundreds of customers forces you to page one of Google safely and legally through the power of the news media. Rocket SEO utilizes national news media campaigns across a gamut of news sites that simply rank instantly. With Rocket SEO, you can boost your website's ranking in Google in 1 week or less with a simple system that leverages the power of major media companies, news sites, and network affiliates of ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, as well as local news sources from the Boston Herald to the Sacramento Bee and all stops in between, to put you on page one of Google dozens of times in under a week, oftentimes 2, 3, 4, even 5 times on page one of Google for one single keyword or for multiple keywords. To learn more, visit hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. That's hundredsofcustomers.com, all spelled out, hundredsofcustomers.com/rocket. All right, and we'll jump back over here really quickly. All right, so fun question time, Dana. Question number one, my magical pen allows you to travel through time and see young Dana fresh out of law school, and you can give him some advice. What advice would you give yourself getting started in your legal practice?
Um, I guess the first one would be um, learn to save better when you're young, so that you have a little bit better financial freedom to do what you want later on.
Hmm.
Um, and so, and that kind of dovetails into the second thing I would do. I mean, I opened this office in 2011, and realistically, I wanted to open it up in 2003. I was ready at that point in time. But my wife was not nearly as excited about the prospect as I was, because there again, it was a financial leap to go from having a structured income stream to making the plunge and having to do it all on your own by yourself. If I would have had the financial wherewithal early in my life, maybe that jump would have been easier and would have been quicker. So those are the two things that, looking back, that I wish I would have done. As far as the thing, it's just worked out really well. I should say that I never thought I would be doing this full time when I was practicing or when I was in law school. And just having the experience in trial work and things. And I would encourage others. I had always made this point of saying that the secret to success is twofold. One is never being afraid of anything, or if you are, at least not letting anybody else know it. And the other is being self-reflective. Why am I doing things this way? Is this for some reason that I'm not thinking through, or what? And realistically, I didn't, most people who do Social Security law either worked for Social Security or they worked for a law firm that did Social Security law, usually because somebody in the firm worked for Social Security. I did neither. I just taught myself. And and I guess whether you call it being young and naive or just determined, but there should be no reason that I should have been able to just teach myself this law just by happenstance. But again, I guess that's the only thing. And the other thing I would say to young me is sometimes you get so focused on going ahead and getting better that you lose the now. I think I would have told myself, enjoy the ride more. There are certain aspects, take your time and be reflective and see what you've done and what you're doing and enjoy those things. Maybe that's just being somebody who's 59 and starting to contemplate where retirement will be, that I realized how quickly 34 years flew by. And I wish I would have savored a few moments more.
That's good advice. I think that's good advice for young Dana, but also for most of our listeners, whether you're in the legal field or not. Save, save much, save often. Maybe even diversify your funds a little bit, because obviously it looks like everything is less than optimal these days. But stop and smell the roses. Take time and enjoy your life. It's good advice. All right. So question number 2, I give you the magic pen. With this pen, you can change any law you want. Can be bigger, can be little. Dana, what are you going to change?
The qualifications for disability and Medicare. You either have to be disabled and then you are very limited in your ability to work, or you go back to work, and there's no in between. And most of the time, people end up having to do this in part because of healthcare, and not having the ability to get any healthcare. It's a little better now with the marketplace, but it is gold to a lot of people to have Medicare ability, which you qualify for 24 months after you're found disabled. And so a lot of people, that's gold. I would love to have an opportunity where I could say, you qualify for your Medicare yet, but we're only going to find you partially disabled, give you half of your benefit, and you can work up to so many hours a week. Because there are a lot of my clients who feel that they would love to be able to get a job working 20, 25 hours a week. They can't handle anymore. But if they know if they do, they'd lose their benefits and they'd lose their Medicare.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people out there. This is not, everybody thinks that this is people seeking a free ride. It's not. I have clients, I've had clients who have tried, I think my record is I had one client who tried, between the time he filed for hearing to the date of the hearing, tried 13 different jobs to find if he could find one that he could do.
Wow.
When he couldn't. I went into the hearing. It was one of the shorter hearings I had. The judge looked at it. I had provided the list of jobs this guy had tried. Judge looked at it and said, "Did you try doing all these?" Yes. He says, "If you can't do these, I can't think of any other job that you would be able to do. So therefore, I'm going to just find you disabled." But that, most of these people really would love an opportunity to work and to feel productive. And so if I could make that change, I think that would benefit society, benefit them. I mean, we're looking right now at having such a shortage of employees, having people that could work part-time who are not working at all because of health or the disability. I think it would be beneficial to the country as a whole.
Gotcha. That's a good idea. No, it really is. And I kind of wonder why there isn't something in the place, because there's real dignity in work. A lot of people find real meaning in holding down gainful employment as long as they can. My father-in-law is a medical doctor. He's in his 60s now, and he's like, I don't intend to retire ever. I'll retire when I can no longer work, and until then, I'm going to keep working, because I think he's a very unique doctor. He takes a very unique holistic perspective in what he does. But I mean, there's just real dignity. But even if you're not a medical doctor, even if you're a greeter at Walmart or whatever it happens to be, for a lot of people, that's real meaning. That's where you find real meaning in your life. Your work, your job, and then your family. Like those are the big things, and obviously a hobby here or there. So I think it's a good idea. That's a somebody listening, get on
Yeah.
that. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask a couple more fun questions then, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. I want to dig into your history knowledge a little bit. I hear you're on a Civil War roundtable, and you've got a big fascination with history. So I want to talk about that, and then I want you to get one more chance to kind of plug your podcast too. So tell me about your historical fascination. Is it particularly are you a Civil War buff? Is it history in general? Is there an era or a part of the world that you really like to focus on, or is it just you love history?
I just love history. I'm fascinated by it. I mean, presidential history. I figured out whether at age 5, if you learned the presidents in order, you could get a quarter from a lot of adults. And yeah, and so I just always was fascinated by it. I mean, the first book, when I checked it out of the library, I think it was third grade. You could go to the library and check out, because reading is sped up so much more from when I was a kid. You didn't start learning to read until first grade, and then sentence structure and starting to actually read materials was second grade, and then books were like third grade. All right. So the first book I ever checked out from a library was Meet Theodore Roosevelt. There was a whole series of these children's books called Meet, and it was always a historical figure. It was a mini biography. I actually found it on Amazon used books and bought a copy of it so that I have it for nostalgia. So I've just always been fascinated. And then as far as the Civil War, I mean, presidential history has always been great. World War II has been a huge area for me. We did some traveling down south through Vicksburg, went to Chickamauga and Chattanooga battlefields, and I got hooked because I think to some extent we're still fighting the Civil War.
Mhm.
And so it's just been fascinating to me. I've been to, probably 20 battlefields so far. And when I get out to Richmond for oral arguments, I always schedule myself a day early, and I'll go up to, let's see, the last one I went was Cold Harbor. Before that, it was Petersburg. And so I'll just spend time on those and research and read. I got subscriptions to several Civil War magazines. So I'm always kind of reading. My ultimate desire is I'll probably never completely quit law. I just like to tone it down and spend other time doing some other things. The
Mhm.
podcasting, I'd like to write and do some books, magazine articles and such. I've been working on a book on the Spanish the American Philippine War that followed after we took possession of the Philippines from the Spanish after the Spanish American War. It's kind of a forgotten war, but I believe it's two or three times as many Americans died in the insurrection after the Spanish-American War as died in the Spanish-American War. And yet no one knows anything about it. And so it's kind of something I would like to do also. So, all right, I guess that's that in a nutshell, I guess. If
No, I have my degree in history and philosophy, and I was a medievalist by trade. I used to find American history boring, but as I've gotten older, I find myself really getting into it. My wife's from Pennsylvania, and so she grew up going to Gettysburg every couple of years, and school field trips and whatnot. And like I grew up in Kansas, so there's a lot less. We have Bleeding Kansas, but there's not a whole lot out here compared to when the further east you go. So
yes.
that is what it is. So last things last, why don't you tell our listeners about your podcast and what you guys talk about on there?
Well, it's the greatest movie of all time podcast. My son Thomas, his full name is Thomas Jefferson Duncan. Uh,
That
and
sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard that name before.
yeah, anyway, my wife about flipped what I told her. That's what I picked. Anyway, but we do this podcast. I grew up, my dad was a big cinema buff. Okay. And he would tell me he had a really rough, terrible childhood. But he knew that because he had uncles that were about the same age as he was. They knew that if they walked the rails in Lancaster, Wisconsin, they could pick up coal off the side that had fallen off the trains. And if you filled a bucket and took it to the station house, they would give you a dime. And for a dime in 1947, 48, you could go in and watch a full day of movies on a Saturday with a bag of popcorn. So you would have, because in those days you had the shorts, you had the newsreels, you had the serials, then you would have the film, and then the second feature would be a lower budget film, which is why they're called B movies. They were B-side movies. And so from little on, he instilled in me this love of movies and this fascination with Hollywood. In fact, Dana, I'm named after Dana Anders, the film actor who from the 40s and 50s, who was in Best Years of Our Lives, one of the movies we reviewed, which is one of my favorites. I think one of the best films ever made about men serving in war. So my son and I have done similar. And so when the pandemic hit, he came and said, hey, we don't have anything else going on. Why don't we do this podcast? And he came up with with a mechanism to grade all the different movies. And so it's called the Rubric. I about 3 episodes in thought it was funny, so I said we should name it Stanley. So we have the Stanley Rubric play on Stanley Kubrick, the director, Clockwork Orange, and 2001 and Full Metal Jacket. Anyway, so we do this about every week. Sometimes if we need to take off because we've got an upcoming vacation, we'll double up and do a couple shows in a week and put one in the can and let it go forward. But the idea is to put every film on equal footing. So it allows us to compare, and you're looking at the list right there. We can do the good, the bad, and the ugly Jaws, and then we can do the Wizard of Oz, and then we've done Back to the Future. We have Blazing Saddles coming up.
Movie that simply could not be made today.
It could and it couldn't. When you start talking about it, and who wrote most of the jokes that were racist in the film? They were done to poke fun at racism, but they were written by Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
And so, he thought they were funny. So you have to put it in context. I think that did more to show the stupidity of racism than anything that ever has been done other since. I think that really puts it. It is to rate or movies and racism what Archie Bunker did to certain values and thoughts and beliefs in this. It's about the same time frame. Sometimes holding things up to ridicule emphasizes how stupid or how poorly conceived they are. And so we're going to do that. But it allows us then to compare them and put them all on equal footing. So now we have our rankings. And you go back and sometimes you watch films that you loved as a child, and then you go, why did I like this? One of the things was a Best Picture winner, Greatest Show on Earth, Charlton Heston, James Stewart, Betty Hutton. I believe it was 54 it won the Best Picture award. It is terrible. It is boring. It has no plot. It has nothing of any value. We're just sitting there and I'm going, when I was a kid, I loved this film. Every time it was on, I would watch it. And I thought it was just fascinating. Now I'm going, ugh, this is not good.
That's funny. Yeah, you know, I think back then it was very experimental, and they didn't have a lot to compare it to, and so you'd take risks, and sometimes the risk would pay off, and sometimes the risk was just novel enough that people really appreciate it. I see a ton of movies here that I enjoy, and I'm kind of fascinated that you got your Casablancas on here with The Waterboy, or the movie
Yes.
Friday. You know, it's just absolutely quite the eclectic list of movies here. So we'll put a link to Dana's podcast down below, and it sounds like it's a good listen. I might have to add that to my queue as well, and I'll listen to a few of these and see if I agree with you or if I just think you're the biggest idiot ever. How can you say that about that movie?
Yeah.
My listeners, I don't even know if my listeners know. I spent three or 4 years of my life, part of my tenure, working at a Blockbuster Video back when that was a thing, and so we would do all these big displays, and we'd have employee rankings, and we'd do the AFI's top 100 and everything else. So I don't watch a lot of movies these days. I find myself just a lot less inclined to watch movies than I used to be. But a lot of these classics are some of the ones I love. I'm showing my kids now. We actually just got the Back to the Future trilogy. I'm gonna make them sit down and watch here soon. So good stuff. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Well, Dana, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You've already given me over an hour and a half of your time. It was actually one of those really long
Sure.
podcasts that winds up shooting and going a long time. But I really enjoyed the conversation,
I
and
enjoyed it too.
I look forward to maybe getting a chance to speak with you again. And I'll definitely be listening to
All
your podcast. I always like to let my my guests have the final word. So, do you have any parting words or thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
No, I guess the only thing I tell everybody this. I'll just say one word: civility. It would be nice to have it back in society.
Absolutely.
Not everybody of another political persuasion is your vile enemy.
Yeah, well, you're an idiot. Your wife dresses you funny.
Yeah,
So
I know. And I mean, I have friends who are on both sides, and we get along as long. Some of them, I just know we don't argue politics because it won't go well. But just civility. I think we've lost that concept in many ways in this country.
I agree with that 100%. Well, Dana, thank you very much for meeting with
Thank
us
you.
today and for giving us all of your time. I really do appreciate it. Had a great conversation. I learned a lot. I learned things I didn't know before, and you actually helped me reframe a few things as well. And one of the things I love about this podcast is getting to learn and grow, which is always great. As always, this has been the Attorney Post. I've been chatting with Dana Duncan of Duncan Disability. Links down below in the description, both to his website and to his podcast on Apple. As always, this podcast, though we do talk about legal topics, does not itself constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Obviously, if you need an attorney who focuses on Social Security or disability, I sounds like Dana would be a really great start. And they do have a toll-free number. I imagine they do a free consultation. So
Yes.
feel free to jump over to his website, duncandisability.com, or give him a call, 888-458 2406. Until next time, this is Justin West, your host, reminding you, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd appreciate, as always, a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're listening to this in any other podcast repositories, your Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, etc., same thing there. Like us, rate us, review us, subscribe, and share. Until next time, remember, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys, and bye-bye.